Stovetop pressure cookers. Are they even relevant anymore? With things like Instapots and electric slow cookers, do you really need to go back to the old school method of using a stovetop pressure cooker? I think so. And in today's video, I'm going to explain why I think this is an extremely valuable tool for almost every cook out there, whether you're a home cook or a chef at a restaurant, and why I prefer stovetop pressure cookers over the electric stuff. Let's dive in. So let's start off by talking about how a pressure cooker actually works. See, a pressure cooker, all it's really doing is providing a sealed environment. And that sealed environment is allowing steam or liquid to occur. That steam from boiled liquid gets trapped and it increases the pressure of the environment, which in turn is going to raise the boiling point of the liquid, which allows you to cook food so much faster in a pressure cooker. But it's doing two things. It's not only allowing you to cook the food a lot faster, but it's also providing a moist environment so your food will remain moist. It's not drying out. To an extent, you could dry out food still in a pressure cooker, but for the most part, if you are precise in your measurements and in the time, you're gonna get fantastic results. So why is stovetop pressure cooker over an electric one? All right, look, there's nothing wrong with the electric ones. Instapots and whatever other brand, great devices, they are. And for the most part, right, I would recommend those devices for beginners. But you guys know me. On this channel, I'm all about the fundamentals and I'm all about teaching you guys to cook using those fundamentals so you can cook on anything, which is one of the reasons why I prefer a stovetop version. I'm gonna get to the pros and cons a little bit later and compare the two. But I wanna emphasize that if you have the electric version, if you have an Instapot and things like that, great. They're great products. I'm not telling you to throw it away and buy a stovetop one. So let's compare the two. With the stovetop pressure cooker, they come in many different shapes and forms, many different prices, and different materials. I prefer the stainless steel versions. I prefer stainless steel for all the reasons why I've highlighted throughout the entire life of this channel. Leaching. Stainless steel for me is just a lot safer. They offer them in aluminum, and bare aluminum reacts. We know that. So I prefer the stainless steel version. You're paying a little bit more, but you're getting stainless steel. They come in 4 quarts, 6 quarts, like the one I have here, 8 quarts, all the way up to, I've seen 100 quart, believe it or not, for restaurants and things like that. I will preference though that for the stainless steel version, you're probably going to be limited to about 12 quarts. I think that's the highest I've seen for stainless steel. Aluminum can go up, right? Aluminum's a lot cheaper to produce. So you'll find them in like, I've seen 100 quarts, which is crazy. But this isn't just a pressure cooker. If you remove the lid, now you just have a plain Jane sauce pot, right? I can use this like I would with any other pot that I have. I can cook in it, I can deglaze it, I can put a normal lid on top that fits and just use it like a normal pot. So it's dual purpose. Anytime I want the pressure cooker, just stick the lid back on there and now we're pressure cooking. It has all the benefits of stainless steel. It's induction ready. Plate down here is ready for induction. All that good stuff. But more importantly, it allows me to completely control the cooking environment. I have complete control over this vessel, and that's very important to me. Now, likewise, when it comes to control, and I've preached this in the channel over and over again, cooking is all about temperature and time. In this case, it's going to be about temperature, time, and pressure. And I've found that when you use a stovetop pressure cooker, see the sweet spot is around 15 psi, and you want to go at about 250 degrees, right? Most pressure cookers, that's where you want to be at 250 degrees, and hitting that sweet spot of 15 psi, you're cooking. I found that with stovetop pressure cookers, they tend to hit that 15 psi a little bit better and more consistent. than the electric versions. Now, the electric versions have came a long way, but the ones that are precision accurate, right? And most of them now have the ability to adjust your pressure, low, medium, high, and so forth, are very expensive. This thing cost me $45. And it's a 6-quart, like I said. It's perfect for 4 people, 5 people, maybe 6 people comfortably. And it handles everything that I need it to. I understand that the electric ones have convenience, right? Because they have presets and things like that you can do with them, and slow cook and all that stuff. So there's presets to kind of guide you along the way, which is why I think if you're a beginner, it's more appealing to you because you have those presets. You don't need them. Let's talk about safety, because I think this is where a lot of this stuff is kind of misunderstood, and there might be a lot of myths to pressure cookers. I want to preference that I've been using pressure cookers for a while. You'll find them in restaurants, all that stuff. There has never been an accident. I've never witnessed an accident with a pressure cooker, like exploding or anything like that. But if we want to talk about built-in safety measures, then I would say the electric pressure cookers are slightly safer. Because they're electric, because the computer, the brain, is controlling the entire aspect of the cook for you and shutting off when it's supposed to shut off and things like that. So in case you forget, right, there's something else that's monitoring the cook for you and shutting down and so forth with those presets. I would say it's a little safer. Both devices have built-in safety measures. So the Stovetop ones have this valve on top, right? And when you reach pressure, this little locking mechanism here, there's a little bolt that rises up, locks the handle so you can't accidentally open it when it's under pressure. And then you have this valve. This valve is going to bobble back and forth, and that's normal. That's a good thing. It's actually relieving pressure as needed, all by itself, doing its thing and maintaining that environment inside. Now, with an electric one, it has the same exact stuff. And there's actually another valve right here for the Stovetop one, but also for the electric one. So as far as like having backup systems, built-in safety systems, they both have it. But the difference is this is all manual. So if you leave it on the stove and you completely forget, that's on you. You're likely going to ruin dinner. It's not going to explode on you. There's a catch. It's not going to explode on you, but the valve system, the safety systems are going to work as intended. And you're probably going to come back with a huge mess in your kitchen because this thing's going to be shooting liquid everywhere, trying to relieve the pressure as much as possible, things like that. You're probably going to crack the pot or something like that. Unless the valves get stuck, and then you have a problem, and that's catastrophic, but that's why they give you 2 valves. If you get both of them, yes, theoretically, it could explode, could be an issue, but that's like a very unlikely scenario. So when it comes to safety, they're both safe. The electric ones are preset to kind of take care of everything for you. The Stovetop ones are more manual and dependent on you. What should you look for in a stovetop pressure cooker? Well, again, as far as materials, I prefer a stainless steel stovetop pressure cooker. Specifically, some of the things you should be looking for is you want these walls to be as straight as possible because you want the walls to not scorch, right? Because then you're getting uneven heat, right? The bottom's really heating, the walls are now scorching, and you're not going to get good results or great results. Likewise, almost all of them are going to have a built-in plate. It is what it is because stainless steel is more expensive to produce than aluminum. So the pot is going to have a welded disc at the bottom. A couple things to look out for though. That welded disc, you kind of want it to go as far as possible to the walls, right? You want it to cover the entire wall. This one's not as far as I'd like it to be to the walls. It's a little short, but it's fine. For the price, it's going to conduct heat just fine. They're going to put a lot of material into that welded disc. It's going to do 2 things. They're going to have stainless steel with another steel to be magnetic, so you can use it on induction, but they're also going to put they're going to make it thicker so it's conducting heat better so you can build up the pressure faster. Problem is, if the sidewalls are cheap, that's a big issue because now you have, the same thing as you would with a cheap welded disc pot or pan with any stainless steel, you're going to have something that's, you know, conducting a lot of heat and then really thin walls, and it's not going to conduct heat correctly. You're going to scorch, right? The walls are going to be scorching, and then you're going to have inconsistencies. So this is always going to be a lot more expensive and higher quality than the sides, but the sides shouldn't be cheap or thin. So make sure that you're getting even quality as much as possible between the bottom and the sides. There's many different stovetop pressure cookers. There's a very simplistic design like this one where it's just a handle, a helper handle, and then, you know, you just move it back and forth to lock it in place and that's it. But some of them will have like a button to push in and lock. Some of them will have even a way to regulate the pressure, low, medium, high with a stovetop one, a manual one. There's a lot more fancier features that you can get is what I'm saying. It's gonna cost a little bit more. And in the description of this video, I'll give you guys this one, my budget-friendly buy, and then one that I think is a little bit better, right? With a little bit more features. You also want to look for a locking mechanism that's clear and easy to see. This one just has a bolt that just pops right up. And you can hear it, right? It's audible when it clicks into place. And for me, I can see it. I can look over and be, all right, there it is. But for some of you, that might not be a clear indicator. There's other ones that are colored, or there'll be like a flag or something that's a little bit more pronounced when it locks, so you can see it from across the room. That's something to consider if that's a big deal for you. The valve on top, this is just a weighted valve. It's very simplistic. I'm good with that. I don't need anything special. There's other valves, right, that are a little bit more modern, let's say. And then lastly, something that I do prefer that this one doesn't have, the higher end models will actually have a gauge that will tell you exactly what the pressure is at all times. I think that's very good, very, very important. It's very important in a restaurant setting. So, you know, if you're just doing this at home, I think this is fine, to be honest with you. I found that this one pretty much keeps pressure, and I could tell through experience by the results of the cook. So I don't know, take my word for it. It holds pressure really well. But yeah, I would have liked to see a gauge. That would have been better. I'm just a data nerd. I want to see data. So how to use a pressure cooker? Well, let's talk about that. We're going to talk about this one in particular. In case you guys are wondering, this is made by Presto. The way that you would use this bad boy is you would use it exactly as you would with any other stock pot or saucepan. Let's say you were making a chuck roast. You would sear the meat just like you would if you were using a Dutch oven, for example. Sear the meat, get them all browned and delicious, and then you can use the fond that's left over, it's a stainless steel, to add in some onions, add in some garlic, deglaze it with some wine or vinegar. Again, very similar to like any other pot or pan. And then you would add in your liquid if you have some liquid, like for example, maybe some chicken stock, beef stock, things like that. Put the lid on, and then you want to heat up the pot using medium heat. You can go high heat if you want, if you're in a rush, but remember, stainless steel is usually very happy with medium heat. Heat it up. You're going to see that this lock indicator is going to go up, locking the handle, letting you know that it's now under pressure. But keep going. I like to keep going until I start seeing this valve bouncing back and forth. Not aggressively, just bouncing back and forth. Once I see that, right, I'll let it go for another 20 seconds or so and then lower the temperature to low, medium low heat, but usually low heat's fine, which you should be looking for in hearing. This should be bobbing back and forth, nice and gentle, and then you're actually going to hear a rhythm. This thing's going to be releasing some steam. It's actually going to be making this like beat, this like rhythm beat. It's going to be making music for you. Once you hit that, then you're at the perfect 15 PSI or so of pressure. Everything's good. Keep it on whatever low heat, medium low heat that it needs to maintain that, and then let it go. Based on what you're cooking, you could be cooking under pressure for 15 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour and so forth. We're going to talk about the pros and cons a little bit later, but that's the learning curve that you need to learn with pressure cookers. For example, my rule of thumb is similar to sous vide. It's really based on not how many pounds of meat that you have, but the thickness of the meat that you need to consider. And let's say a chuck roast, if you have, I don't know, an inch cut, right? An inch thick of chuck roast. And even if you cut them into smaller bits, you kind of want to look at the thickest of the bits and then judge from that. But my rule of thumb is for every half of an inch, you need at least 30 minutes to cook under pressure. So if you have an inch thick cut, then you need to cook for at least an hour to get that perfect, pulled beef, right, where it's falling apart. So let's go back to the chuck roast analogy. Let's say, you put in your chuck roast and everything, you put in the beef, you locked in, and now you're cooking under pressure. I would cook until you're about 45 minutes and then release the pressure. And you would release the pressure. There's 3 ways to release pressure. Let it release naturally. Just let the pot sit for about 10-15 minutes or so, and then the steam will naturally release on its own, very low, very gently. You'll see this thing come down, the lock bolt letting you know that now you can open up the lid. That's the gentle way. The other way is to grab some tongs or a towel, make sure it's something thick, and relieve the pressure manually. It's gonna scream, and it's gonna be this really cool looking thing, really, for some of you, scary thing, where the pressure is gonna be released really quickly. That's fine too. And then there's another way of doing it by putting this entire thing under cold water and lowering the temperature. That's another way that you can release the pressure as well. And that's sort of middle ground. I just lift it up and let it do its thing. If I'm not in a hurry, I'll just, take it off the heat and let it naturally depressurize. Now it's time to put in other things. So for the next 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes or so, I'll put in the potatoes and, build up the steam again, cook. The potatoes are going to need probably like 20 minutes or so under pressure, and they're going to be perfect. So the whole thing got cooked in about an hour and 15 versus if I would have done it in a Dutch oven, it would have been 3 hours or so, an hour on the stovetop, and then another 2 hours, 2 hours and a half, 3 hours in the oven to get that perfect pulled beef, texture. With the pressure cooker, it's about an hour and 15, and that's it. And you're going to get the exact same results. So that's how you use it. A couple of myths. People will say, well, if you're using a pressure cooker, it's not the same result. The food doesn't have enough time to absorb the seasoning or flavor or yada, yada, yada. That's not true. You're cooking under pressure. It's a sealed environment. Remember, that seasoning is everything's just speeding up. The environment is being forced together. There is absolutely zero difference between pressure cooking something for an hour and 15 minutes versus slowly cooking something in a Dutch oven for 3-4 hours under a sealed environment. And that's the important thing. This is sealed. If it wasn't, then it would be a different story. Okay, now let's talk about pros and cons of a pressure cooker. I'm going to be kind of referring to a stovetop pressure cooker, but most of these apply to an electric one. First pro, they're incredibly versatile. Like I said, you can use them as regular saucepans or sauce pots, stock pots, whatever, or you can use them as pressure cookers. They come in many different sizes. You can get them in huge sizes and different materials. You are going to cook your food very quickly compared to other things. The food is going to be perfect, moist, fall off the bone. Potatoes are going to be perfect. Mashed potatoes on a pressure cooker is just a lot faster and a lot easier, and the consistency is almost like perfect from edge to edge and all that stuff. So the food's going to come out at its best, basically. You can do potatoes. You can do breakfast in a pressure cooker if you wanted to. You can do desserts, cheesecake in a pressure cooker. There are books written with hundreds of recipes, and it's entirely using pressure cookers. They're reliable and durable. The technology is based on basic physics. They've been around for a very long time. They're well known. No issues. It's a tried and true design. The cost. If you're doing a stovetop pressure cooker versus an electric, then, there's a pro and con there. But in general, pressure cookers are fairly cheap. This one, like I said, was like $50, I think, on sale. You can get a great one for well under $100. Now let's talk about the cons. It can be scary at first. I'm gonna acknowledge that. I think a lot of people are scared of pressure cookers. The first time you do it, you might be a little bit nervous and you're kind of, finding your way through. But then after the second or third time, you're solid. So there's this like hump you gotta get over. But once you get over it, you're gonna love it. I think the biggest con though is you have to be precise and there's no way of measuring things when it's in here. You have no clue if your food's cooked all the way through. So for example, let's say you're cooking up some potatoes and you're putting it in for about 15 minutes. It's not like you can probe the potatoes to see if they're done or not. They're under pressure. So if you open it up and it's like, crap, they needed another 5 minutes, right? Then you got to go and bring this back up to pressure again and cook them. And that can be annoying, right? So there is a learning curve. It's not a steep learning curve. It's just getting acquainted with it. Even with the electric ones, they may have presets. But the presets are very general, right? Based on the thickness of your food and all that. And some of the more expensive ones will ask you, how thick is the food? And they'll adjust for you, or they'll give you a guide, a chart. But you can find a guide or chart online for the stovetop version, and it's the same thing. You cannot use your wireless thermometers in this thing, right? Pressure cookers are a very harsh environment. I think most, if not all, wireless thermometers would probably explode or get damaged in some way, the electronics. Another con for me, like most cookware, there's a lot of different variations of this guy. You can find some really cheap ones, again, going back to what you should look for in a pressure cooker, that are not built very good, that are going to give you horrible results, and you're going to think that pressure cookers suck. I think the market's really saturated with the cheap stuff right now. Just go with a good brand. And finally, the last con, it's going to be up to you guys, but it's also kind of like a pro and con. You may not find a ton of uses for this, which is why I think a stovetop version is better than an electric one. I would encourage you guys to use it as a regular saucepan, stock pot, and then learn different recipes. It's not just designed for stews. You can even make eggs. So, put some effort into it. But you may find it like, I don't know, it's not really saving you that much time. So it may not be as valuable to you as it would be for another person. That's basically it for this video. My final thoughts are, I think everyone should have one of these. It's not that expensive. It has dual purposes. It definitely saves you a lot of time on certain dishes. It's not going to be like used for every single thing, but where it makes sense, this thing's a lifesaver. Really does produce amazing food at a fraction of the time. And finally, I think it's a good thing to learn, right? Science is cool. You're using science in a very practical way to do some amazing things. That's it for me, guys. I hope you found this video informative. And if you did, please consider subscribing and joining our channel memberships. I'll catch you in the next video.